Sorry about the lack of a stream yesterday, but I'd slept really badly the night before and I just couldn't. So... we have to disappear partway through this one because I'm going to delivery override at that time. Whatever. Good morning to you, Mr. Naruhodo. Good morning, Professor. Ready for today's proceedings? I hope so. I should be. Even I with nothing left to... Good morning, my dear fellows. Oh, Mr. Sholmes, you're here. Why, naturally, a true gentleman stands shoulder to shoulder with his friends in battle at all times. Thank you, I really appreciate it. I'll see you later then. Now, Professor, we really need you to remain calm in the courtroom today.
Yes, do try your hardest not to enter the witness stand uninvited again.
Yes, I will. I really... My dear fellows, I must interject. Oh, you're still here, Mr. Sholmes. What's the matter? Surely you've overlooked some praise, have you not? To be cast in my direction? Sorry, I don't follow. Oh, must I spell it out? I, the great Herlock Sholmes, the greatest detective of worldwide acclamation, arose at some ungodly hour to be here now, first thing in the morning. A miracle, you must agree. I must agree then. As you know, my sleep is quite impregnable. Iris had to employ her full gamut of tactics. She pulled the covers off, shook me, poked my cheeks, punched me and kicked me from the bed. Then she poured a boiling cup of her latest experimental blend on my face, and at last I was bestirred.
Oh my, Iris has been busy.
Iris doesn't have it in her to go that far. She's too nice. I sense the spirit of a fellow scientist, one who relishes the infinite possibilities of blending tea. I'm the one worthy of praise here, not Iris. This is my victory. Sorry to cut in. Sorry to cut in. Oh, Inspector Gregson, good morning. Gregson, my dear fellow, why the grim expression at this delightful hour? Delightfully early hour. Oh, I don't know. Maybe because I've been confronted with a grimmer expression, eh? That's gonna be annoying. Sorry, something outside. Dear me, are you going to take that insult lying down, Professor? What? I don't know! Professor. Anyway, here's the paperwork you asked for. What paperwork? Ah, I took the liberty of requesting it yesterday. I have a feeling it may prove useful. You wouldn't believe the hoops I had to jump through to get this brought out in the archives. It's the Professor's autopsy report.
That mass murderers?
Who killed 5 members of the aristocracy. He was found guilty in a closed trial 10 years ago now. It was all done under wraps. And he was quickly executed soon after the trial. It's all in here. I don't know what to say. Thank you, Inspector. Yes, much obliged, Gregson. Us lonely lot at the yard are just doing what we can, in the shadow of the great Detective Sholmes, of course. Well then, Professor Hairbrain, this is it. Today we're going to lay all this to rest at last.
I wish you the best of luck, Professor.
I suppose he'll be in there today, will he? Drebber.
Yes, we expect the prosecution to summon him as a witness.
I'm still amazed that you managed to find him in just one day. I really owe you both so much. Consul and the defendant. The trial is about to resume. Kindly make your way into the courtroom at once. And this is it then, the final chapter. My heart's racing a little. I've not felt this before, actually. With strange foreboding. As if something's going to happen in this trial that I'm not ready for. I can't let that distract me from the only thing that really matters. Finding the truth. Well, that's... This lock does look very strong, doesn't it? There's definitely no way you could remove the mask yourself if it was put on you.
What a terrible way to treat someone, even a convicted criminal.
I know, it's starting to make me livid, actually.
Mr. Naruhodo, please.
I mean, just think about it. Imagine if you had an itch on your cheek all of a sudden. You'd be utterly helpless.
Well, yes, that's true. But I'm not sure that warrants quite so much anger.
Oh, right. Sorry. In the name of Her Majesty the Queen, I hereby declare this court to be in session again. We will resume the public hearing of Albert Hairbrain, here present, who stands accused of murder. Are the counsels for the prosecution and defense ready to proceed? The prosecution is ready, my lord. The defense is ready, my lord. As promised, Lord Van Zieks has his apprentice with him. His apprentice with memory loss. If I may, Lord Van Zieks. Yes, my lord. There appears to be someone standing at your side. Ah, yes. My apprentice and assistant. The prosecution believes today's proceedings will see the complexity of this case rise considerably. I therefore instructed my assistant to attend to ensure the smooth running of the trial. And the smooth running of liquid refreshments by the look of it.
The way he holds himself, the way he moves. It couldn't be anyone else.
But he's still suffering from amnesia, so there's really nothing we can do at the moment.
I know, but this is so very hard.
It would appear the prosecution has done a fine job in responding to the demands of the court made yesterday. I understand you have successfully secured the engineer who disappeared from the scene on the day in question. Yes, my lord. I intend to call him as a witness shortly. Very good, very good. Now then, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, who have been chosen at random to represent the will of the people in this courtroom today, are you ready and willing to proceed? Of course, my lord. I'm sure we all understand the importance of doing our civic duty.
I do so despise deception and deceit. I find it so very wearing.
To take a man's life with a conjuring trick, it is against the magician's code, not to mention the law. Many fake scientists should feel the wrath of God, if you ask me.
You have to listen to what's said on both sides of the fence, and settle on one. That's it, isn't it?
It wasn't like this in my day. It wasn't like this at all. If all parties are ready to proceed, you may begin, Lord Van Zieks. Before I do, my lord, there is a report I must read to the court. Yesterday, at the Grand Exhibition Grounds, the evidence of primary importance in this case, the super high-voltage instantaneous kinesis machine, which was installed on the experimentation stage, was deliberately destroyed in an explosion affected by an unknown person or persons. It was... what? An explosion? This is an outrage.
Their voices are getting together.
Yes, I heard this grave news yesterday. Scotland Yard submitted a report to my office in the evening. I read that the machine was blasted to smithereens and the wreckage reduced to ash in the flames. I have here a photographic print of the scene taken in the wake of the explosion. It shows what little remains of the machine. Yes, a terrible business.
He did it to destroy the evidence, did he? That Enoch Drebber.
The court will take this print as evidence, counsel. Late yesterday afternoon, the protection afforded to the machine by the Special Dispensation for Scientific Equipment Act was revoked. However, before a thorough investigation could begin, the invention was obliterated from existence. As such, this will become a very different trial. As it stands now, with no evidence on which to draw meaningful conclusions, the authenticity of the kinesis machine will remain forever in obscurity. Indeed, a most unfortunate state of affairs. However, one thing remains clear. The victim's death was the result of the actions of the accused. Of that, we can be certain. For it was the accused himself who was operating the machine, and who ultimately caused its loss of control.
Objection!
As Lord Van Zieks rightly says, this is a very different trial now. The accused accepts responsibility for his part in the events that transpired. He acknowledges that Mysterious Man died as a result of the accident caused by his machine's malfunction. However, unbeknownst to the Professor, he was being deliberately deceived by a pair of very clever fraudsters.
Names, counsel, if you please.
The engineer, Mr. Enoch Drebber, and the victim himself, Mr. Odious Man. So what exactly were those two men up to behind the defendant's back? The defense intends to expose that information, thus establishing the unequivocal innocence of the defendant.
Thank you, counsels. The positions of the prosecution and defense have been clearly stated. Lord Van Zeeks, summon your first witness, please.
At once, my lord.
The prosecution calls the engineer, Mr. Enoch Drebber, to the stand. State your name and occupation for the court.
Name, Enoch Drebber. Occupation, hard to pin down, I would say.
See that black monocle?
Yes, why do I feel as though I've seen it somewhere before?
Oh, you do? I had exactly the same feeling myself. Your file indicates that you are currently being investigated in connection with another case. The theft of a waxwork moral, is it? A most extraordinary sounding business.
But that has no bearing on this trial, I assure you. Leave it from your mind.
You are familiar with the public experiment carried out at the Great Exhibition some days ago? The accused super high voltage instantaneous kinesis demonstration.
Yes, you could say that. I am aware of it. There was a terrible accident, wasn't there?
It was you, Mr. Drebber, who constructed the vast machine used in the experiment. Or so the investigations indicate. Can you confirm your involvement?
Yes, I constructed it, in precise accordance with the blueprints, but that's all.
Then the court would be very interested to hear your thoughts about the machine, I'm sure.
An amazing device, if you ask me. The pinnacle of modern science, making instantaneous kinesis a reality at last. What?
Good gracious. Do you mean to say that the experiment was bona fide? Is that your belief, sir?
Yes, that is very much my belief. Such a waste that it blew up.
Objection!
We've already established the machine was nothing more than a prop for an elaborate conjuring trick.
Objection!
You've established nothing of the sort. All that was shown during yesterday's proceedings is that the same outcome could have been produced by means of stage trickery. The defense merely proposed a method and demonstrated its feasibility, nothing more. You've procrastinated long enough, I feel. Witness, you will now give your formal testimony about the machine that you constructed for the purpose of the demonstration of the Great Exhibition.
Understood. I met the young professor approximately 1 year ago through Mr. Asman's introduction. He provided me with the blueprints and I constructed the machine to his precise specifications. It was no trick. If the whole show was a fraud, it would have required a body double. Tell me, did the victim have a twin? All the spectators saw the birdcage appear above their heads and then crash headfirst into the crystal tower. A terrible accident, I grant you. Perhaps the science on which the machine was built was flawed somehow.
A body double?
That goes without saying, surely. You give the impression that something has moved when in reality it hasn't. It's a basic conjuring principle. The deception cannot be achieved without substantiating the original, without substituting the original with a fake at some point in the performance. But would I be right in saying you haven't managed to establish anything along those lines? Ugh.
Incidentally, the prosecution has already confirmed that Mr. Asman has no twin siblings. It's my understanding that this witness is very well versed in conjuring art forms. But such talents do not indicate that he was actually able to accomplish what he claims. Namely, the construction of what by all accounts must have been an extremely complex scientific machine.
Whatever do you mean?
Yesterday's proceedings brought the true nature of your past exploits to light, Mr. Drebber.
Indeed it did, my lord. As a swindler who preys on innocent scientists to elicit government grant money through conjuring know-how. Yes, it's true that I possess considerable knowledge of stage magic. But crucially, my scientific knowledge more than matches that of any academic in the field.
Investigation of the witness's workshop attests to that claim, my lord. As evidence, the police found this Royal Society trophy for young talent in science there.
Yes, that's true. We spotted it there ourselves.
If a hypothesis is sound, it can always be forged into a physical manifestation with sufficient skill. Though I may have solved the secret of some deceptive wiles to snivelling, talentless scientists in the past.
Would you therefore assert that the explosion of the machine was
an unfortunate accident, or, of course, a deliberate act of murder carried out by misuse of the science?
Counsel for the defense. Your cross-examination, please.
Yes, my lord. Okay.
Hold it!
So you're already acquainted with Mistress Man himself? Not really, by chance. I'd seen his name mentioned in the papers, that's all. But I had no interest in his private affairs. If he was an unscrupulous investor, it was no concern of mine. As long as people pay their bills, I took up my tools and construct what they ask for. So why did Mistress Man approach you in particular then? Who can say? I presume because my name is associated with excellence in engineering. Not to mention excellence in fraud. Hard to gauge, but the point is, all I did was construct the machine according to the blueprints I was given.
In other words, the kinesis machine was built on solid scientific principles.
Yes, you might say that. Professor Hairbrain certainly has a mind like no other.
Hold it!
It's clear that you have both scientific knowledge and knowledge of conjuring magic. However, the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to handle whatever comes along. But your implication is that I furnished the machine with some trickery, I think. It's a possibility that we have to explore. Unfortunately, though, the machine has been blown to Kingdom Come. So there's really nothing left to explore, is there?
It appears that the kinesis machine was fitted with a timed explosive device of some kind.
And there's nothing left of that device either. Not a single shred of evidence remaining, I hear. Must have handled this from the outset. But in any case, it's abundantly clear that the experiment couldn't have been a trick.
Hold it!
Of course, that's it. Mr. Usman has a twin.
Objection!
Has a twin. Perhaps my learned friend wasn't listening earlier. Mr. Usman has no twin siblings. No, I heard you before. But the thread of hope hadn't quite left me.
The demonstration could have been a trick. There was somebody who looked sufficiently like the victim. But Dr. Scythe absolutely ruled that out as a possibility.
It is beyond question that the victim himself, Mr. Usman, did not move from the stage to the Crystal Tower. The fingerprints found at the scene attest to the fact.
So it can't have been orchestrated using someone who looked identical to Mr. Usman then. What are you thinking, Mr. Naruhodo?
Oh, no, nothing. Just the idea of someone who looked identical to the victim is playing on my mind.
Hold it!
It crashed headfirst, you say? According to the many witness reports from those there at the time, yes. Were you not there at the exhibition grounds on the day? Unlikely. I rarely leave my workshop. Yet another of your unique inventions was found at the scene. Well, it was the unveiling of a machine I'd laboured over for many months. I saw it clearly with my own eyes. The birdcage plummeted headfirst into the tower. What a surprise. I believe the victim's neck was broken from the headlong fall, wasn't it? How would you have come to that by that information? Even an infernal recluse like me reads the newspapers, you know. According to the reports, 2 injuries were apparent on the victim's body. Yes, he'd been stabbed in the chest by a screwdriver believed to belong to the defendant. He had broken vertebrae as a result of a fall from a considerable height. Correct. My learned friend has been doing his research, it seems. Do we know which injury was the fatal one? Sadly not. Forensic science is not yet at a level where such things can be determined. What we do know is that the victim died having sustained both injuries at some point during the experiment. And since he was found in the birdcage with his neck broken, it's obvious that he fell from a considerable height. I suppose that's hard to deny.
Hold it!
So, you understood the science, did you? Not in the slightest. Oh, right. As I've said a number of times, I'm an engineer. My job is to manufacture according to the blueprints I'm given. I would be inviting manifold problems if I foolishly allowed my brain to digest the ideas behind them. I could be accused of stealing those ideas, for example. But how is it possible to construct a machine without really understanding the principles it relies on? Well, you're practicing law without really understanding the principles it relies on, aren't you? Very good point.
Stand up for yourself, Mr. Naruhodo.
The point is, the experiment resulted in instantaneous kinesis taking place. As such, the science must be sound. Yes, and really, experimental results are all that matters when it comes to proving a hypothesis. Certainly very sure of himself.
What do you think, Mr. Naruhodo?
Well, now that The machine has been completely destroyed by yesterday's explosion. It's going to be impossible to argue its authenticity one way or the other.
If we're unable to establish that it was a piece of stage trickery rather than genuine science, you have no grounds on which to demonstrate Professor Harebrain's innocence.
The Mistress Man and this man in the stand tricked the professor and used him. They took advantage of his naivety and his unbending belief in his work. I won't let them get away with it. Seeing as the professor is an old friend of Lord Van Zeek's, what on earth must he be feeling towards Trevor? There's a thing, isn't it? On the bottom.
Objection!
We've examined the birdcage that crashed into the crystal tower ourselves. As you can see, the cage, which is a wooden construction, has sustained damage in one particular spot. Following the explosion, it fell some 30 feet into the glass of the crystal tower. That level of damage is to be expected, surely. I agree. The damage itself is entirely understandable. What doesn't make sense is the location of that damage. All the breakages in the wood are at the base of the birdcage, not the top. What are you saying?
That's the opposite of where they should be.
That's right, my lord. The birdcage that was at the scene is damaged at its base. So we have reports of the birdcage falling headlong into the crystal tower, yet the damage is at the bottom. The only way to reconcile these two facts is to accept that there were two birdcages in play that day, which were at some point switched. Switched during what wasn't a scientific experimentation at all, but an elaborate piece of stage trickery.
Good gracious. Explain yourself, witness.
Well...
If we examine the facts, there's only one logical conclusion we can draw. The damage on the base of the birdcage clearly indicates that it crashed tail first into the tower.
Objection!
But multiple witness reports claim it fell headfirst.
The birdcage materialized in the sky next to a balloon, flying over the stage, following a spontaneous explosion. At an altitude of some 60 feet above ground level.
Which is approximately 18 meters.
It then proceeded to fall some 30 feet into the crystal tower, in the ensuing deflagration. Witness reports of such chaos are notoriously unreliable.
Objection!
But the victim's neck was broken.
Objection!
He plummeted 30 feet inside a heavy wooden cage. However he fell, it would be unsurprising to find one or two of his vertebrae crushed.
Kick. Riveting scientific analysis of the events from the prosecution there. Though, to be even more rigorous, you would have to say it was only one vertebrae, actually. Wasn't quiet for long.
find it hard to see what's motivating Lord Van Zeeks. This witness is clearly a swindler, and one who deceived a personal friend of his.
We're going to establish this deception. Do it right.
Sorry?
Alright, that's the undertone here. Yes, and there's one more point the defense appears to have forgotten. It obviously wasn't a trick, as a certain truth very plainly demonstrates. What?
It seems to me that the cross-examination had better continue until we resolve this matter. Mr. Drebber, you will amend your testimony with details of this truth.
Of course. We must treat the matter scientifically after all. Nearly had him there. The kinesis clearly took place because there's nowhere else 30 feet high for the birdcage to have fallen from.
Hold it!
What do you mean? Well, before the demonstration began, the victim was alive on stage in front of the audience. Yes, there are lots of witnesses who saw Mistress Man on the experimentation stage, that's true. And the victim's neck broke as a result of an impact following a fall. Logically, therefore, the victim must have fallen from somewhere.
The balloon that exploded was at an altitude of 60 feet. The point of impact on the crystal tower. Impact on the tower was 30 feet up. The difference of 30 feet is therefore the total distance the birdcage fell.
And there's no other location from which the cage could have fallen that distance if it didn't drop out of the sky. Ergo, the victim himself must have been beamed from the stage into the sky above the crystal tower.
Attention, scientific analysis. Dear me, every time I hear it explained it sounds increasingly plausible.
Oh, yes. It's all very well thought out.
Certainly all the spectators on the day saw it. The birdcage plummeting 30 feet through the air, I mean.
Irritatingly, yes. Blech.
Objection!
This is the diagram. This is a diagram of the experimentation stage and its surroundings. We know that somehow the birdcage appeared in midair before falling down into the crystal tower. Fall of about 30 feet, or 9 meters. However, if you examine the diagram carefully, you'll see that there is one other possible location from which the birdcage could have fallen. The same distance of 30 feet.
No. Well, it appears the defense has a possible explanation to put forward. Go ahead, counsel.
Yes, my lord. Of course.
You will indicate the place to which you are referring on the same diagram. The alternate location from which the birdcage could possibly have fallen the requisite 30 feet.
Take that!
Place I'm referring to. Yes, here.
But that's where the birdcage would have been to begin with.
Which is exactly the point, my lord. Yes, the birdcage was in the machine on the stage. But what we must also consider is the height of the stage itself.
Go on, Consul.
It turns out that the experimentation stage was built at a considerable height, above ground level. If you look at the diagram, in fact, you'll see that it's about the same height above the ground as the balloon was above the crash site. When the experiment got underway, the machine and the birdcage were engulfed in steam. At that moment, the floor of the stage gave way, and if we assume there to be a void underneath, this birdcage and the one seen by the audience would have fallen almost exactly the same distance. Once again, my lord, this all points to the fact that there was not one birdcage, but two.
Objection!
My learned friend has no evidence that the stage had such a contrivance in its design.
Someone is responsible for the criminal destruction of the kinesis machine itself, it's true. However, the stage still stands. And it takes a moment to look at the photographic print of the scene following yesterday's explosion.
Good lord! The metal grill that formed the floor of the machine is undone!
Yes, most likely blown open by the force of the explosion that destroyed the rest of the machine. The defense calls for the space below the stage to be investigated immediately. Mr. Drebber, it was you who built the kinesis machine, which means that it was you who built the two bird cages that we used to carry out this deception. Whether Professor Harebrain's hypothesis is sound or not makes no difference, because it's the construction of the machine that matters. Because it's the construction of the machine that matters, a machine designed to take Mr. S-Man's life. Lay the bane firmly at the Professor's door, something that could only have been carried out by you, Mr. Enoch Drebber.
Objection!
If my learned friend has reached the end of his wild assertions, the prosecution would like to crush the defense's argument slowly but surely.
What?
Your argument fails to hold water on 2 counts.
2?
Firstly, before and after the experiment, this witness went nowhere near the kinesis machine. Every relevant member of staff on the exhibition has attested to that. And I believe members of Scotland Yard have also been on watch duty at every public experiment. In other words, Mr. Drebber had no opportunity to switch the alleged pair of bird cages.
Objection!
I've already explained why he wouldn't have needed to.
The nonsense with the crossbow. That doesn't bolster your case at all. The man who disappeared from the stage and the man who crashed into the tower are one and the same. The forensic investigation team's report is unequivocally on that point. And the second flaw in your assertion is a distinct lack of motive. Why would this man have wanted to take the victim's life? He had no reason to do so.
A motive. I have to think of everything myself.
I have here a contract provided by the witness. What contract is this, Lord Van Zeeks? The contract into which Mr. Drebber entered with the victim, Mistress Marn. It reads, Mr. Drebber is to receive 30% of all remunerations from government grants, or their outcome, or other income, bleh. 30%, certainly very favourable contractual conditions.
But there was one very important provision bolted onto that clause.
What provision? Mr. Drebber may only uphold this right on condition that both contracting parties are alive.
In other words, if either of us were to die, the contract would become null and void. So you see, I had nothing to gain from Mr. Asman's death. The diametric opposite, in fact.
Need I say more? The witness had neither an opportunity nor a reason to commit the alleged crime. In short, the possibility of Mr. Drebber having done as you suggest is nil. It seems the defence's assertion was somewhat wide of the mark. Lord Van Zeeks, you will submit the contract as evidence, please.
Contract, provider anal funding, labor materials. It's true. Drebber had no opportunity to switch the birdcage under the stage with the one in the Crystal Tower. Couldn't have done it. But in any case, I have no idea what his motive might have been.
There is one aspect of your argument. It still holds true, however. There were two birdcages. The prosecution is unable to deny that. So I'm sure you're on the right lines, Mr. Naruhodo. And I've no doubt there are other aspects of your assertion that are undeniable truths too.
Well, it would seem that the defense has no rejoinder to offer.
Well, I must say I am a little surprised. I came here to testify about the machine I built, and instead my reputation is defiled. But the prosecution's counter has set the record straight, I think. It's impossible that I'm the culprit.
Objection!
At the beginning of this trial, we believed that there was only one birdcage. Yet now we know there must have been two. In other words, there was more to the demonstration than we realised at first. I think it's abundantly clear that the same applies to the culprit.
Get to the point.
The stage demonstration was constructed and set up in its entirety by you, Mr. Drebber. Therefore, it's inconceivable that you had no hand in the events that transpired. So, if circumstances mean it's impossible that you could have carried out the crime yourself, it points to the fact that someone else was involved.
Someone else? Consul, are you suggesting?
Yes, my lord. Mr. Drebber had an accomplice.
Objection!
An accomplice now. Well then, I presume you're prepared for what's to come. Now that you're accusing not only this witness but someone else of the most serious of crimes. If these accusations turn out to be false, then make no mistake. The prosecution will demand an equally serious punishment for your slander. Well, Counsel, do you intend to pursue this course and formally accuse another party of involvement in this matter?
What do I do here? At the moment, this is a little more than a hunch on my part. I don't know for sure if Drebber had an accomplice or even if he really is the culprit here. One way or another, though, I have to make my position clear as a lawyer. So what's my stance going to be? Did Drebber have an accomplice or not? The defense is ready to name Mr. Drebber's accomplice. Somehow the two birdcages must have been switched. Everything points to that. And according to the coroner's report, that's not a possibility. But that inconsistency itself is a clue.
Consul,
My lord?
you have received a stark warning already. If you are nevertheless determined, then I must now ask you to identify this alleged accomplice by name. So, your answer, please. Who do you claim to have been Mr. Drebber's accomplice?
Take that!
The name of the person in question is...
What's wrong, my Nipponese friend? Surely fear doesn't bind your tongue now. It's a little late for that.
Of course, I'm afraid. After all, naming her in this capacity is definitely going to make waves. A lot of waves. I could very well turn every single person in this courtroom against me. I'm sure it will be alright, Mr. Naruto. Thank you, Mr. Sato.
The enemy always appears larger than life, but you all appear exactly the same to the enemy.
Right then, here goes.
You've kept us waiting long enough. Your answer, Counsel, now.
The person who colluded with Mr. Drebber in order to carry out this wicked crime is Scotland Yard's coroner, Dr. Courtney Scythe.
What the blazes are you talking about, Dr. Scythe? The head of the forensic investigation team and the coroner who conducted the autopsy on the victim.
We know that there were two bird cages, so who could have carried out the switch to complete the illusion? The accident happened in front of a huge crowd of spectators, and the area was immediately sealed off. Then, everyone, police officers included, were banished to make the way for the forensic investigation team. When else could the switch have occurred? It can only have been in that team's presence. It's essential that the court determines exactly what happened following the incident. The defense demands that Dr. Scythe be summoned to the witness stand at once to testify.
You've got a nerve, lad. Standing up there dragging the yard's name through the mud.
Didn't mean to.
I know the woman very well. There's no better dead room worker out there. How dare you call her a criminal? My learned friend's imagination appears to be wilder than the East End at night. But the recklessness of your accusation aside, there's another grave problem with your argument. one which the prosecution demands you address at once.
Grave problem?
Oh my word.
Who do you claim acted as the victim's doppelganger?
What?
Certainly if the birdcage containing the body of the victims were exchanged for another, that cage must also have contained a body. And yet, no missing persons or accidental deaths of anyone even remotely resembling the victim have been reported. Which means that there was no one, dead or alive, who could have fulfilled the role of a body double for Mistress Mann.
That's true. My argument is that there were 2 bird cages, then there must also have been one person inside each. I don't know if I've got an answer to this yet, have I? What can I do to reveal how this body double stunt was achieved? Very well, the defense will address my learned friend's concerns by presenting evidence that reveals the true nature of Mistress Mann's body double.
Good gracious, evidence? I do hope this isn't filibuster, counsel. The court is expecting a name. If you think you have relevant evidence, present it now.
The body double and the birdcage were hiding inside the balloon that was floating above the stage, which means that any witnesses would only have seen that from 60 feet away. So who was it that appeared out of an explosion some 18 meters above the spectators? The body double inside the second birdcage was...
Take that!
We know that the victim, Mistress Mann, was in the birdcage that was situated inside the kinesis machine on stage, and therefore he couldn't have been inside the second birdcage. Instead, that contained something else. What's being described as a body double, which is what fell from the sky and crashed into the Crystal Tower.
Yes, counsel. According to your somewhat elaborate version of events.
And that body double inside the second birdcage was in fact...
It's alright, Mr. Naruto. You're ready for this. Just steel yourself and come out with it.
Thank you, Mrs. Sato. I needed that. As I was saying, the body double inside the second birdcage was... as unbelievable as it may seem, that thing there.
Objection!
Open your eyes and look into mine, my Nipponese friend. Now, tell me, what are you playing at?
Stand firmly, Ryunosuke. This is the time to show your Japanese spirit. As the court will observe, this is a waxwork model. A model, in fact, of an infamous London murderer from 10 years ago, the Professor.
Objection!
You started by indicting the leader of the forensic investigation team as accomplice in this crime, and now you've moved on to indicting waxworks?
Yes, that's about the size of it.
But why? And why this waxwork? It looks nothing like the victim. In fact, it could hardly resemble him less. What possible justification can you give?
If you want to know why, ask Mr. Drebber.
What?
Just days before Professor Harebrain performed his public demonstration, Mr. Drebber abducted this model from Madame Supel's.
Did you say abducted?
And 2 days after the incident at the Great Exhibition, he returned it to the museum.
Then the timing. Is this true, Mr. Drebber?
At first, I couldn't see why Mr. Drebber would have stolen the waxwork and then given it back again. But Now the reason is clear. He took it so that he could put it inside the second birdcage as a body double for Mr.'s man.
Objection!
Are you hearing this, ladies and gentlemen of the jury? Are you hearing the defence's astonishing proposal? That the witness fabricated this vast machine with the intention of deceiving some wretched scientist. That he did so in collusion with the country's finest coroner on a public stage in front of a vast audience. And that to effect the deception, he used a waxwork model that in no way resembles the victim. Are we really to believe this far-fetched tale? What do you decide?
Objection!
Wait. Yes, if you put it like that, of course it sounds implausible.
My lord. I need to speak, if you please. Go ahead, Mr. Foreman. Myself and my colleagues have reached an agreement. Very good. In that case, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you will state your leanings for the court to hear now.
Guilty!
Guilty.
Guilty! Guilty!
Guilty!
Kill me!
So, as indicated by the foreman, the jury has reached a consensus.
I knew that was going to happen.
We shall go through this, Mr. Naruto, as we always do. And uncover some new truths along the way, I'm quite sure.
Yes, I agree. I'd have to appeal to the jurors as usual. See if I can persuade them to change their minds.
The defense will now embark on a summation examination. Are you and your fellows ready to proceed, Mr. Foreman? We are, my lord. Very well. In that case, I ask you now to state clearly for all present here the grounds on which each of you has decided that the defendant is guilty of the crime which he is charged. I've known that woman for years. She'd never be an accomplice to anything. It's utter nonsense to think that those two would ever be conniving with one another.
Oh dear, I think this is most troubling. But surely the waxwork that man stole has nothing to do with the coroner, is it?
I've had my own problems with members of the police. I do not trust them much.
I've seen no rigorous proof that this waxwork was ever inside the birdcage. It's conjecture.
Accusing someone without right evidence. He's not a proper job, is he? I won't have it.
Somewhat unsurprisingly, it seems the introduction of this waxwork model to the proceedings has polarized opinion. Given that its face is obscured, and its build is no way resembling that of the victim, I can only applaud my learned friends' tenacity at suggesting it was Mr. Man's body double.
Yes, the applause is deafening, and yes, I know it seems extraordinary. But that's the point. That's why I have a strong feeling it's actually a greater clue than anyone yet realizes.
What are you thinking, Mr. Naruto?
Can't explain why at the moment. Feel as though there's a specific reason why it was used. Why it had to be this model.
Really? A reason why nothing else would do, you mean?
Yes, and I'm convinced. It's something far more significant than whether or not the model looked like the victim.
Well, if that's the case, we must prevent the trial from ending prematurely at all costs.
Yes, agreed. I have to find a way out of this.
If you are ready, counsel, you may proceed with the summation examination.
Yes, my lord. The order of things seems to have changed around here for some reason.
I'm a copper, lad. It's a copper's discretion to bend the rules sometimes when needs must. What's wrong with that?
Where do I start?
I've been working at the yard for 40-odd years.
That's even more than I thought.
We've only had a Metropolitan police service in town for 70 years now, you know. Of course, times have changed. Public don't trust coppers. Back when I started, it was rough. We had to fight crime. And we had to fight to win the people's trust as well. And when we did, forensic science was in its infancy too, even more than it is now, and she spearheaded the revolution.
Dr. Scythe, you mean?
That's right. About 10 years ago now it was, when I was still a youngish bobby in my beat. That's when she started making a name for herself as a top-class coroner. And now look at her, head of the forensic investigation team, a woman no less. Well, you won't hear me complain. It's what we all dreamt of back then, I tell you.
Could you tell me about holding that gun in the air?
We're all out to uphold justice, lad. Full of him we were, full of him.
It's coming across loud and clear.
Hold it!
But we're only just starting to understand this case. What are you reading there, sir?
The man behind those murders on Solna Pond Street was caught in 2 days flat. That's real policing for you.
That's really not relevant to this case, is it?
You're wrong there. Because it was Dr. Scythe in charge of examining the bodies. And it was evidence arising from her work that led to the arrest of the scoundrel responsible. And that's right. Oh, that woman is at the forefront of this country's fight against crime. The idea that she's somehow involved in this murky business is a load of old bosh.
I thought it was up to me to press the jurors, not the other way around.
Hold it!
Why would you assume that?
Well, quite simply because that unsettling swindler has no relationship with the woman, does he?
True, as it stands, we don't know of any connection.
Oh gosh, but it would be delightfully romantic if they were somehow to have a mutual interest in the waxwork.
Romantic?
A woman of society such as myself views everything in terms of relationships, you know.
Well, you learn something new every day. Even if you don't want to.
One might wonder about a possible relationship between the defendant and this coroner woman. Or perhaps between the defendant and the handsome prosecutor just there.
This woman may be more astute than I've been giving her credit for.
If that's the woman's stance, then perhaps demonstrating some connection between the waxwork and Dr. Scythe would be enough.
Yes, I agree. As soon as we have even a whiff of a connection, she'll be the first to know.
Hold it!
What sort of problems? Let's just say we run into each other on numerous occasions when I've been performing on the street. Right, I see. Obviously, artists such as myself cannot appear on stage as we work in close proximity to our audiences. Still, we perform our great magic in parks, on street corners and the like. But the police use any excuse to make our lives difficult.
Excuse me!
Do you have something to say in response to that, Mr. Ottoman? Ottomol?
Who are you calling a mass murderer?
Sorry, my mistake. I got confused because I heard you look like him.
I don't look anything like the man. You want to be locked up, sonny.
Thanks, Mr. Sholmes. Perhaps we can move on. I was really wondering if you had something you wanted to add in response to what juror number 3 just said. And clearly you do.
Back in my day, back in the good old days, it wasn't like this.
What was it like, sir?
We worked our fingers to the bone to earn the public's trust, we did. And by Jove, we earned it. People respected us back then.
Respected you?
No one would have called a coroner into question in them days. Coroner's report was the hallmark of an investigation done right. Especially when Dr. Courtney Stevens put her name to it. She was the best of the best.
Hold it!
In the apple of the force's eye.
Hold on a minute. What are you talking about? Who's Courtney Stevens?
Sorry, I got a bit carried away there.
Stevens is Dr. Sire's maiden name. Maiden name? So that was before she was married.
Well, of course, yes. Silly me. It's Scythe now, isn't it?
Stevens. I've heard that name somewhere recently.
Anyway, the point is, those were the great days of policing. Not right now.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt, sir. But do you think you could change your statement to include that name?
Well, yes, I don't see why not. She was Courtney Stevens back when I knew her, of course. A legendary coroner even then.
Hold it!
She was legendary, was she?
What did you say? That woman is still the best coroner in the land. Head of the forensic investigation team.
Legendary was your description, sir, not mine.
Rubbish. That word never passed my lips. I'd never describe anybody that way, ever. Not if they were still in the game.
The point you're trying to make is that Dr. Scythe is an extremely talented coroner. Would that be fair?
It would. What for the fact that you're trying to drag that legendary woman's reputation through the mud.
I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that in legendary.
Hold it!
But you claim the whole instantaneous kinesis demonstration was a trick.
That I did, but there's more than one way to pull a rabbit out of a hat, isn't there?
Sorry?
I grant you, given that this cage appeared from a mist and explosion, there had been no way to use a real person. But if a waxwork had been inside, the culprit could at least have had the decency to make it look like the victim.
I'm not sure exactly how much criminals are governed by decency.
The point is, if you're going to make a claim about that waxwork being inside the birdcage, you need to give us some evidence. Without that, it's just not science.
I suppose we should have expected nothing less from it than a logical argument from a fellow at the Royal Society. But that perhaps means his mind can be changed if we manage to present suitable evidence.
Evidence that the professor's waxwork was inside that birdcage. Can I produce that or not? Actually, I have something I'd like you to see, sir.
Well, I must warn you that I firmly believe it's only wise to trust men in white coats. So given your jet black outfit, I don't mind admitting to a sense of trepidation here.
So you're interested in one in black. Looking in the mirror must be very trying. I do have some evidence that proves the waxwork was inside that birdcage. May we...
Take that!
What's that? A piece of glass? Though it's unusually thick for glass.
Yes, it's a piece of broken glass that we found inside the jacket of the waxwork. As you say, it's not ordinary glass though. It's very thick and clearly made for extra strength. Much like the special glass that was developed for the construction of the Crystal Tower.
The Crystal Tower. Holy smokes.
Exactly, the centerpiece of the Great Exhibition, where the very incident we're talking about took place. On the day in question, the birdcage fell from above and smashed through a window of that special glass.
From whence that small piece originated. Is that it?
Precisely. So, what do you say? Now that clear evidence in support of the assertion has been placed before you.
Well, as I said, I only trust men in white coats as a rule, however. When the reasoning is sound, it's fair to say colour shouldn't come into it. In light of what you've shown me here, yes, I feel obliged to change my position on the matter. In that case, juror number 4, you will amend your statement now, please. The presence of that piece of glass leaves me in little doubt that the waxwork was indeed inside that birdcage.
Hold it!
Thank you for reconsidering your position, sir.
The words are misplaced, boy. My opinion is governed by logic and science and nothing else. Yes, science is where you should direct your words of gratitude. What's the matter with you? Too good to say some words of thanks to the mother of all academic subjects.
What is it about scientists, honestly?
Hold it!
Got to ask, why have you brought that corn into court with you?
Colonel Cobb, he's been ground back on the farm. Picked him off on the way into town. He's a proper nibbler, he is.
Yes, the nibbling seems to be taking quite a while. Maybe it could wait until after the trial.
Oh, I don't like the sound of that. You need kernels at times like these. Whenever I have something big to decide, the kernels always point me in the right direction, see?
You're talking about your cob of corn?
Nibble noble, guilty bubble. Nibble not guilty out. Nibble noble, guilty bubble. Nibble not guilty out. Nibble not...
Blah, 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 blah. Oh, tongue-twisting shit.
Perhaps it's akin to fortune-telling with flower petals like people do back home.
So Professor Harebrain's fate is to be decided by a cob of corn. Could you not at least wait until you've had more time to find the truth before deciding on the defendant's guilt?
Oh, I don't know about that. My tum's awfully full already.
Amazing. It seems a little far-fetched to think that the waxwork model of the professor was in the birdcage. But on the other hand, it explains a lot.
There really is a reason why that particular waxwork had to be used as Mistress Man's stubble. We must do everything we can to make the jurors understand it.
Truth is, I'm sure that's the key to this, but it's the most puzzling part of it too.
In that case, you should see what additional information you can glean whilst trying to change the juror's mind. If you can read a book whilst eating a rice cracker, Mr. Naruto, I'm sure you can do this.
Right, yes.
Objection!
Those two statements clearly contradict each other.
Good gracious. To whose statements do you refer, Consul?
So, juror number 2.
Oh gosh. Me? What can I do for you?
I presume that you heard what juror number 6 said in his statement. It brought to light the maiden name of the coroner, Dr. Scythe, which in turn has revealed a connection that wasn't apparent before.
Well, naturally. As a woman of society, I find such connections and relationships irresistible. But, oh golly, I'm afraid I fail to see what you mean.
Dr. Scythe's maiden name is Stevens. Through that name, the coroner is very differently linked to the waxwork of the killer. The defense has evidence to prove it.
My goodness. Evidence, you say? How utterly enthralling.
Consul, the court cannot overlook that last remark. I very much hope there is substance to your claim.
Of course, my lord. I would ask the court to look at this. The evidence that clearly links Dr. Scythe to the mass murderer known as the Professor.
Take that!
I have here a certain autopsy report from 10 years ago.
A 10-year-old autopsy report? What relevance does that have?
It is, of course, from the autopsy of the person portrayed in the waxwork, the killer known as the Professor.
The Professor's. But the man was a capital offender, so...
That's right. This is the certification of death that was drawn up after the convict's execution. The identity of the killer was never made public, so the report gives few details. But what's important is the name of the coroner who wrote it. Courtney Stevens.
Oh my. Courtney Stevens?
Strike a light!
It appears that the Professor's autopsy was conducted by Dr. Scythe 10 years ago. And a few days ago, Mr. Drebber very deliberately stole the waxwork of the Professor from Madame Two Pals. A waxwork that doesn't in fact resemble the victim, Mistress Man, at all.
Do you suppose there's some unsavory relationship between those events?
Absolutely. I'm sure of it. There's no doubt in my mind that the Professor case is at the heart of a link that we have yet to uncover. Between Dr. Courtney Scythe and Mr. Enoch Drebber.
Hidden links, mysterious connections, secret relationships. This is all most extraordinary. We're surely obliged now to explore this further.
Quite right. We can't let this trial come to an end now. Not while there's this cloud of suspicion hanging over the yard's best coroner. Wasn't like this in my day, but we're still here to uphold justice in the end.
Objection!
Those two statements clearly contradict each other.
Good gracious. To whose statements do you refer, Counsel?
You could put down your corn for a moment, juror number 5.
Oh, you mean me?
You pointed out that it's wrong to make an accusation without evidence. But the accusation that the waxwork model was inside the second birdcage on the day in question is not without supporting evidence, as the defense demonstrated to the jurors sitting beside you.
Oh, is that right?
Would it be fair to say you didn't follow the argument?
I don't understand much besides Colonel Cobb, to be honest.
Of course you don't.
If I could interject here.
Please do, sir.
Now that this assertion of yours about the waxwork has been backed by some solid evidence, it would be wrong of me as a man of science not to pursue the matter further.
Oh well, me too then.
Sorry?
If this brainy gentleman says he's right, then he must be. See, I wouldn't dream of going against Colonel Cobb or anyone who's got stuff in between the ears.
Success? If you can't call it that. If you can call it that, even.
Thank you, Consul. That will do. As a result of the summation examination, the jury's overall leaning has changed. 2 jurors now call guilty, against 4 who call not guilty. Accordingly, the court has failed to reach a consensus at this time, and the trial must continue.
We did it.
Oh, well done, Mr. Naruto. Another wonderful victory.
The waxwork of the despicable professor. Used as a body double for the victim in this quite extraordinary case. I must say it's extremely hard to believe the assertion could possibly be true. However, it would appear that it does at least warrant further investigation.
It's the waxwork of the professor that links Mr. Drebber and Dr. Scythe. I'm convinced that there's a special significance to that link.
I don't know what you're hoping to prove, lad. I really don't.
The truth, sir, by using evidence and testimony.
If the court is to delve deeper into the alleged involvement of the waxwork in this case, then the prosecution calls for the owner of the model to be summoned as a witness. The owner? Madame Soupels.
I really thought that Lord Van Zieks would object to this whole line of inquiry.
Very well, I concur. Make arrangements for Madame Soupel to appear as a witness with immediate effect.
Listen carefully, my learned friend. Oh, yes?
You should know that you're on the brink of opening Pandora's box. The court shall now adjourn for 45 minutes. During that time, the prosecution will summon the new witness and prepare her for the taking the stand.
Madame Soupels, yes. I shall see to it at once, my lord. Just change the name slightly. Right. How long is the next part? Roughly speaking. Long enough to warrant its own part. Okay. That then will be all for now. I shall be back in an hour or so with Xenoblade. Because I got to make up a lot of time for yesterday and the day before. And today there actually seems to be somewhat of a breeze, so maybe I ought to get some work done. For now, however. Bye.